Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Minority Leader Schumer, for those remarks. I am humbled. You know, everyone knows the old saying, my, how time flies when you're having fun. My time here is drawn to a close, but despite the difficulties, the challenges, despite the rancor that we often see in this body as well as Washington, D.C., I can honestly say I've had a lot of fun. The last 3 years have been amazing, and I have loved being a member of this body. I've actually able to accomplish a few things thanks to you. But you've been fun. You've not just been colleagues. It's really been good. And by the way, your staffs have been awesome. I know you hear that a lot or from constituents. Maybe you don't hear it enough from other senators. Your staffs have been amazing to us, and I really very much appreciate it. You know, as the minority leader said, everybody knows I'm a baseball fan. You go into that office, you will see in my reception area all 100 baseballs that I had signed. And it was fun getting those. Either here on the floor, in a committee room at the retreat that the Democrats had. There were so many that had never signed a baseball, and you figured out, and it wasn't easy to sign a baseball. And even those that signed in their office, where we sent them to their office, they always came up to me and talked about it. And it was a time to put politics aside and just talk a little bit. Something we really don't do enough of around here. Leaving the weighty politics and responsibilities that we have just to sign a baseball and talk about how much fun it was. I remember right after I was elected, I was talking to a friend of mine, dreaming big about the things that we could accomplish that make a difference in the lives of the people of Alabama and the people of America. We talked about the possibility that we could work on a bill as important as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But I knew though, such opportunities were not likely, especially in what I knew to be a 3-year window and not knowing what the future would hold. Although, I got to be honest, I had a pretty doggone good idea when I got here. If there's one thing my mama always taught me, it was to be realistic about things. But I knew it was going to be tough. But to even have an opportunity to talk and work on things that's had such transformational change, you know, those kind of things come along once in a generation, if we're lucky. They're that legislative equivalent of a perfect game in baseball. You're lucky if you get to be part of that in your career, but you always have to hope. You have to strive for the possible, not just the likely. For those of you who really don't know about baseball, and there may be a few, a perfect game is just that, 9 innings, 3 outs, 3 up, 3 down. Everything has to work together in synchrony. It's not just the pitcher who throws balls and strikes. It's the outfielder who catches the fly. It's the second baseman who has to get the out and throw the player out, the runner at first. Everyone has to fall in line and work together as a team. As a team. And it's not just that, it's the people on the field. They're all working. And they're all striving for the same goal. As it turned out, I didn't get a chance to be part of a perfect game. Didn't think I would, but I didn't get that chance. Sometimes I worry, as many of you do, especially if you listen to the farewell speeches of Lamar Alexander and Tom Udall and Mike Enzi and others. I worry if those perfect games can ever be had in this Senate again. I worry about that. But we always come close, and I came close. Right after I got here, I got invited to be part of the Common Sense Caucus, which I had to explain to people in Alabama that that's really not an oxymoron, that there is common sense up here. But within 6 weeks of being up here, I was at Susan Collins' office with so many here, some 20 senators, Republican, Democrat, talking about immigration, working on immigration reform. It was the hottest topic of the day, an important topic that's still important today. And I just marveled at the fact that here I was 6 weeks into this, and I was in that room being a part of those discussions. what was even more astonishing to me is that people actually wanted to hear what I had to say. That didn't happen. Having grown up raised 3 children, been married, you don't always get that when people want to know what you got to say. But they did. And I was so gratified and I was so honored. You know, we'd meet in Senator Collins' office. We'd meet in hideaways. It was exciting. And we came so close. Y'all remember that? We came so close. Within about 3 votes of doing what they said couldn't be done. Of doing something that was possible, but not probable. That sense, what I saw of my colleagues is why we ran for the Senate. I could see it, I could feel it in those rooms, in those discussions. I could see it on the floor that day as people were voting. It's why we wanted to be in this body. I remember sitting in the cloakroom and I was as disappointed as ever when we failed. And for a long time, probably still to this day, when I'm asked, what is your most disappointing day in the Senate, I will always talk about that vote that fell so close, which was so important. But what it did demonstrate is through that effort that anything is possible. You got to come close sometimes before you get across the finish line. You got to play in the red zone a little bit before you get the touchdown. You got to hit that line. But whatever we did, it's possible. The Senate is capable of great things if we do them. Of bridging divides that society may view as too wide to cross. We can do that. It is not that wide between here and there. It is not that wide, and people need to know it and respect it. I am not the first, and I certainly will not be the last, to talk about the importance of bringing people together who hold opposing views and working toward what is both possible and palatable. But all too often, the desire to do that kind of gets lost among other actions that don't quite match the words that we say. I noticed the other day how many heads were nodding at the farewell speech of Senator Alexander, Senator Enzi, Senator Udall. And then what happens? I've looked at a lot of farewell speeches in the last month. They all say a lot of the same things. And everybody, I'm sure, nods. We got to do better. You have to do better. You know, I don't think I fully appreciated it. And I listened to the minority leader talk about where I've come from Fairfield, but I don't think I fully appreciated it until fairly recently. But it seems like I just kind of love a lost cause. It just seems like every time that there is something that needs there, I'm there. Fighting for justice, for others who feel like hope is lost. From the church bombing case to a Senate election in Alabama. I fought for those causes because I believe in hope. I believe in redemption. I believe in the possibility. Some may call that naive, and many have. But I've not been afraid to touch on the so-called third rail issues of our political system because I believe that right now especially there is no time for caution. My first speech on the Senate floor was about gun violence. No one could believe a senator from Alabama actually talked about how we can stop gun violence in a way that made some sense. Not from an extreme view on the right or an extreme view on the left, but right there in ways that made sense. It was a topic that I knew could have easily been twisted into a negative campaign ad, which, by the way, it was. We saw it coming, but I also knew action was so important. And we took some small steps on that issue over the last 3 years, despite a lot of political pressure to the contrary. And I hope you'll do more in the years ahead, because lives will depend on it. Everything doesn't have to be a perfect game. That's the great satisfaction in the day-to-day triumphs. You can, and we did, hit a home run or two and more than our share of singles and doubles. I'm really proud of the 20-plus bills that I led or co-led, bipartisan bills that have been signed into law over the last 3 years. None would have been possible without bipartisan work. One of my first original bills, the Civil Rights Cold Case Act, Records Collection Act, would never have become law without the commitment of Senator Cruz to help bring long overdue closure to the victims of those terrible crimes. I see Ted in the back. I appreciate Senator Cruz's involvement in that. And I will have to say, it was so much fun after we got that done to go back home and tell that to all my Democratic friends. What is your proudest? I said, well, the proudest moment right now is with my partner, Ted Cruz. And they went, oh! But it shows what is possible, folks. And that was an important bill. None of those bills would have meant more to me, though, than the bipartisan effort that I led with Senator Collins to eliminate the military widows tax that for almost 2 decades had deprived widows of full survivor benefits that they deserve. So many of you went to bat for that bill. Senator Reid, Senator Inhofe, others. Now, you were getting a lot of pressure, not from me or Susan Collins. You're getting pressure from a lot of those military widows. They've been up here for 20 years. And for 20 years, the dollars and cents had prevented that from becoming a reality. We fought on that because we knew what we were doing was right. We knew it was right. That you could not put a price on the duty we owe to the men and women of our armed services and their families. I'll never forget that day in December when we passed the NDAA that included the elimination of the widow's tax. In the gallery was a large group of Gold Star widows who had been up here for 20 years plus to try to get that done, never been able to reach the goal. And on that day, we did it. You did it. Susan and I get a lot of credit, but it was this body, with the help of some folks in the House, that made it happen. And that was just one of the memorable days on the floor. Swearing in day was unbelievable, simply an explosion of emotions. To walk on the floor as a United States Senator some 37 years after I left the floor with my old boss as a young staffer to my mentor, Howell Heflin, to take the oath of office for his seat was just really remarkable circle of life. And there are two especially significant things about that day too. One is that I hope that you all recognize by now that the freshman class of 2018 will likely go down in history as one of the greatest freshman classes ever. The team of Smith and Jones can't be beat. It is as American as apple pie. And I was really proud and honored to be there with Tina Smith that day. But I was also honored to be, if you recall, that there were 3 vice presidents on the floor of the Senate that day. Now President-elect Joe Biden escorted me in. Former Vice President Walter Mondale escorted Senator Smith. Mike Pence, current Vice President, swore us in. And actually, if you now think about it, we had a 4th, soon-to-be Vice President, Kamala Harris. That's a pretty remarkable time. Pretty remarkable. It was also remarkable days when what I hope is going to be a new tradition in the Senate took place when we had on 2 different occasions, once each year, 6 senators, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, reading Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. That document remains one of the most significant in American history, and it is as important today as it was when it was written in 1963. In some ways, maybe more important for the moment that we find ourselves in. I have asked, and I know he will do this, my colleague, Senator Brown, to carry on that tradition in my absence. Also on that day, then there was the day of the swearing in January of 2019. I was here to observe, to pay my respects to all those who were returning, for those that were joining. And I was standing in the back by the cloakroom, and Senator Tester walks up. Says, Jones, what are you doing? You can't get anything past Tester. There were probably a few profanities laden in there as well, if you know Senator Tester. And I said, well, John, what do you think I'm doing? With probably a couple of other kind of milder profanities. And he said, look, Daines is caught in a snowstorm back home and can't make it here. And I'd like for you to escort me when I take the oath. As it turns out, it's likely to be the only time I'll get to do that. And it was a true honor, my friend. Simply sitting at this desk is perhaps the greatest thing taking this place in, watching each of you, noting the bipartisanship, especially as we close a Congress, especially as we close this Congress. How senators move freely from one side of the aisle to the other. Occasionally, I will tell you, I confess that I'll just come back here by myself and I'll open this drawer and I'll read the names of the senators who sat here. John Kennedy, Ed Muskie, Hubert Humphrey, my colleague, Senator Shelby, and so many others. And it is just overwhelming. You know, so growing up, it was always the presidents who captured, and presidential candidates who captured my attention. I knew the names of some senators. But that began to change for me watching the Senate Select Committee on Watergate when I was in college. Remarkable time and a remarkable committee. And then everything changed again in 1979 while I was studying for the bar and got a phone call from Senator Heflin's chief of staff, Mike House. I'd campaigned for the judge. Mike offered me a one-year position on Heflin's Judiciary Subcommittee, which I eagerly took. That year not only changed my life, but brought about a respect for this body, for the Senate, as an institution, as individuals, as for so many of its members that I'd never had before. And from that point on, folks, I was hooked. I was hooked on this body. Before being elected to the Senate, and now I'd come to love the Senate a lot. And importantly, all of the possibilities that go with it. Which is why I don't really want to spend my last moments on the floor talking about what I've done. I want to talk about what needs to be done, what can be done, what is possible. You know, even back in 2017, people said it was just not possible to elect a Democrat from Alabama to the U.S. Senate. And here I've been. It's possible to make affordable, quality health care a reality for all Americans. The ACA right now is the best hope and only plan that is out there. As President Barack Obama himself said, and everybody should do this, if there is a better plan you can come up with, put it out there. Let's do it. You publicly support it. The goal is health care for everyone in some way. And there are so many in this country and in my state of Alabama that desperately need it before, during, and after this COVID crisis. It's possible to give people in remote and rural area access to health care. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take getting out of partisan corners. It's possible to provide a quality education to every American child. I know education is often funded locally, but it's possible to do it. You just got to roll up your shirt sleeves and get it done. It's possible to extend broadband, access to broadband to all Americans and bring every man, woman, and child into the modern era, just like the Congress did with Franklin Roosevelt in the Rural Electrification Act back in the 30s. Broadband's the new power. It's possible to do that. High speed and affordable, that is a key. Affordable broadband. It's possible to ease the burdens on working class Americans by setting a minimum wage that is not going to hamstrung businesses, but will raise the quality of living for so many in this country. So many in my state are in poverty, but yet they work. They work hard, but yet they're still below that poverty level, and we need to do what we can to lift them out of that poverty. It takes a lot of work. It takes hard work. It's possible for law enforcement to serve and protect all Americans, not just some, to root out the systemic racism that exists within law enforcement by enlisting the support of both law enforcement and the communities. It is possible. I will candidly tell you another great disappointment was when we let that moment pass this summer. Hoping that with a new president, maybe a new Senate, maybe a new Congress, we could get something accomplished. And I hope that that still happens. But I was disappointed we let that moment pass this summer when all of the country and all of the world was behind us to say, please do something. Please do something that we've known about for decades, for centuries. Please do something. Law enforcement said, let's do something. We let it pass. But It's never too late to do the right thing. It's never too late for justice. It's possible to ensure that every eligible voter is able to cast a ballot and have it counted. Now is the most important opportunity. We have seen in 2020 concerns about our election process, that it might have been stolen, there might have been fraud. Use that opportunity to say, don't let these allegations have any credence going forward. Let's get together. The technology is there. Figure out a way that together we can make our election safe and secure, and that all people will have access to the ballot box. All people that are eligible to vote in this country. It's possible for our system of justice to treat all Americans equally. Not just talk about it, but to do it. It is what I have tried to do throughout my career. It is possible, and this is going to be a challenge. It's possible to restore the American people's faith in government. And we all know right now that that faith has been shaken for many, many reasons. But the faith has been shaken, but it is possible to restore it. It's possible for each of us to learn, as Atticus Finch taught us, to see things from another person's point of view. Walk around in their skin or in their shoes. To see things from others' point of view. To find that common ground. It's possible for us to realize that deep down that progress is not a zero-sum game. That a rising tide lifts all boats. These things are not easy. They take dedication and hard choices, but they're worthy goals. And I know many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are dedicated to these same goals. And though I won't be able to co-sponsor anything with you from this point on, or debate the amendments in committee, if you get amendments in committee, I'm going to support you in whatever efforts I can, no matter what side of the aisle your desk is on, and I'll keep working toward the same goals too, even after I leave this place. Remember though, as we get into the vitriol, as we get into the political rhetoric, just remember the Jones law of politics, adapted from Newton's third law. Just remember, for every action, even in politics, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if you go too far on one side or the other, you're going to get a reaction on the other side, just as hard. And that makes it harder and harder to reach that common ground. You know, in Senator Brown's book about his desk and the people in his desk, he quotes the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, who observed, "The good things in history are usually of very short duration, but afterwards have a decisive but a short time of influence, a long influence over what happens over long periods of time." Short time, and I know you may be thinking, well, Doug was only here 3 years, so that's what he's talking about, but I'm not. In the history, I'm looking at something bigger, whether it was Martha McSally's 2 years, or my 3, Senator Gardner's 6, Senator Udall's 12, Senator Alexander's 18, or Ensign Roberts' 24. Or if you're like Pat Leahy, since Moses was in the bull rushing. Our time here is short. There is not anybody on this floor right now who's not thinking about their time that they were sworn in and said it was just like yesterday, because it was. Our time is short. It's of a limited duration. And we've got to act like that. And we've got to make sure that every day we're moving. It's been a realization of a long-held dream. I've got so many to thank, and Doug Turner, who is here, Joe Trippi on my campaigns, and my late friend Giles Perkins. An amazing family. My bride Louise. My rock. My 2 boys, Carson and Christopher, who have wanted to kill both me and Louise since they've been living at home during the pandemic. But they're incredibly supportive. And then my daughter, Courtney, and her husband, Rip, and the 2 beautiful girls, my granddaughters, that are still the brightest stars in my sky, Ever and Ollie. I'm grateful to each of you, my colleagues, and all that you've helped me. I'm grateful to an amazing staff that I'm not going to go all the way through. They have been true rock stars. And I'm going to enter something into the record about my staff. I'm grateful for the advice and counsel of Alabama's senior senator and an old friend, Senator Shelby. While Richard and I may disagree on many policies, we've shared a commitment to the people of Alabama to make sure that we do all we can to get people in Alabama the quality of life that they deserve. And I so much appreciate Richard's service to the people of the state of Alabama, his long and distinguished service, which started out as a Democrat, by the way. Just saying. It's where the seed was planted, folks. I also want to mention briefly the chairman of the committees that I worked on, Senator Crapo, Senator Inhofe, Senator Alexander, who was one of the first people that helped me come over, and the work that we did together, who pulled me and helped me. Senator Collins, who chaired the Aging Committee. But I'm especially grateful for the ranking members of those committees, Senators Brown, Casey, Murray, and Reed. Their friendship and counsel have been invaluable. And of course, I want to thank the minority leader for all of his work for me, on behalf of me. And as I think you guys know, not always the people of Alabama, Senator Schumer never tried to put puppet strings on me. I know I got accused of that, but he never, ever tried. And for that, I am very grateful. To the people of Alabama, I promise to do my best to represent each of you, whether or not you voted for me, and I'm proud of the work that we did on your behalf and that I've accomplished on your behalf. Thank you to the people for giving me the honor of serving you as your senator. Finally, I'm going to resist the urge to tell you what's wrong with the Senate, how it operates today. You hear it virtually every time a senator gives a farewell address, and instinctively, you know it deep down. But I will offer you this. There's a book I finished reading recently that Ira Shapiro, a former staffer, wrote. Many of you may remember or know Ira. He wrote a book called The Last Great Senate. It ought to be required reading for every senator coming in. It's published 8 years ago about how the two Congresses during the Carter administration and how they operated. Bob Byrd is the majority leader. Howard Baker is the minority leader. How they got things done for the American people. And the authors lament that the Senate doesn't operate that today in that fashion. I was here for one of those years. Senator Leahy was here for during that time. His closing is even more important today as it was when the book was published. He said, America is adrift in turbulent and dangerous waters, facing enormous challenges at home and abroad. We urgently need our once vaunted political system to function at its best instead of at its worst. To be sure, it's more difficult being a senator today than it was in the 1960s and the 1970s. The increasingly vitriolic political culture fueled by the 24-hour news cycle, the endless pressure to raise money, the proliferation of lobbyists and demanding organized interest are all known, and they take a toll. But all of those factors make it essential that our country has a Senate of men and women who bring wisdom, judgment, experience, and independence to their work, along with an understanding that the Senate must be able to take collective action in the national interest. Please remember that as you go about the country's business. Remember that as you go about the Senate's business. Remember that as you go about your business as a senator. And as you do, keep and preserve the reverence that the founders envisioned for this body. As former Majority Leader Mike Mansfield once said, the constitutional authority does not lie with the leadership. It lies with all of us, individually, collectively, and equally. In the end, it is not the senators as individuals who are of fundamental importance. In the end, it is the institution of the Senate. It is the Senate itself as one of the foundations of the Constitution. It is the Senate as one of the rocks of the Republic. Something we should all remember. One more little bit of advice. Take out the word negotiation when you're talking about legislation. Don't talk about negotiating this bill or that bill, whether it's COVID relief or even appropriations. You work, but let me tell you what's happening out there. What's happening out there with the people is that they hear those words and they think that this is some side or the other trying to get an advantage. It's like labor and unions. It's like, like a civil or a criminal lawsuit. Somebody's trying to get an advantage and to try to do things for their own interest. We can talk about it from the Democratic side of how we're working for the people, we're negotiating for the people. We can talk about it from the Republican side that we're negotiating for patriotism and businesses to make sure they're protected. But what's being heard by the American people is this is all about Democrats. This is all about Republicans and getting that political power. Talk about common ground. Talk about sitting down with the administration or whoever and finding common ground. Talk about the goals that you agree on and how to get there. Negotiation is just a bad word, and I hate it, but it is. So as I prepare for the next chapter of my life's journey, there's a sadness at what I'm going to leave behind. But there's also optimism. Optimism, the glass half full. The men and women who serve in this body and their successors, and the staff that support them, and I emphasize that again, the staff that support them, leading together will continue to bring a better future for the American people, for your constituents, for each of us. Together, not as a caucus, but together as a Senate. You're just a damn unbeatable team. You're an unbeatable team. So may God bless you all. And may God continue to bless the United States of America. Mr. President, with a deep sense of humility and gratitude, I say for the last time, I yield the floor.